23 seconds. That's how long a Spitfire pilot had on average, before the first bullet from a diving Messerschmitt cracked past the canopy. Can you imagine that? Just 23 seconds to react, to maneuver, to fight for your life. Yet the real shock isn't that terrifying stopwatch. It's the classified flaw hidden in every single one of Britain's most famous fighters. A design oversight so serious, so fundamental, that engineers expected the wings to literally fold upward at 400 miles per hour, tearing themselves apart. But they flew anyway. And for decades, nobody breathing today was supposed to know the terrifying truth behind the legend. Section 1. The myth we all swallow. We grow up being told the Spitfire won the Battle of Britain. It's practically etched into our collective memory. Sleek, fast, graceful. The airplane that by all accounts saved the free world. Schoolbooks, classic movies, even postage stamps repeat the line, burnishing that iconic image. But here's the thing. Popularity isn't always the same as numbers, and admiration isn't quite the same as engineering truth. While the public celebrated that gorgeous elliptical wing, believing it to be the pinnacle of aerodynamic design, Air Ministry files stamped secret told a far darker story. If a pilot in the heat of a desperate dogfight held full throttle in a high-speed dive, pushing the aircraft to its limits, the ailerons, those crucial control surfaces on the wing, could flex so badly they actually reversed. Think about that for a second. You push the stick right to turn right and the wing goes left. The consequences were predictably catastrophic. Pilots felt it first over the Channel in late 1940. A terrifying, unexpected loss of control at the most critical moments. They called it aileron snatch, a vicious, unpredictable phenomenon that often killed rookies who, in their panic, tried to yank the stick back too fast, exacerbating the problem. The Air Ministry's solution to this potentially fatal design flaw? A 5-page memo. Not a recall, not an airframe redesign, certainly no public warning. Just a quiet, understated piece of paper advising pilots to avoid prolonged vertical maneuvers. It was a desperate, almost cynical, prayer that young, inexperienced pilots would somehow learn this deadly secret before they paid the ultimate price. A silent acknowledgement that the myth of invincibility was more important than the lives of the men flying them. Section 2. The Hurricane in the Shadows. Meanwhile, while the Spitfire was soaking up all the glory, the Hawker Hurricane, a decidedly less glamorous machine, was quietly doing the heavy lifting. With its thicker wing and a fabric-covered rear fuselage, it looked almost old-fashioned compared to the Spitfire's sleek all-metal lines. Yet this workhorse of the RAF shot down more German bombers than all other British fighters combined. Records, finally released in 1995, paint a clear picture. A staggering 55% of Luftwaffe losses during the Battle of Britain were credited to Hurricanes, compared to 42% for Spitfires. So why the discrepancy in public memory? Well, press officers ever keen on public perception pushed the Spitfire because it simply looked like the future. It was the poster child for modern aerial combat, a symbol of technological prowess. The Hurricane, on the other hand, was seen as utilitarian, almost brutish. Its story was buried for morale reasons. After all, who wants to celebrate the unglamorous older brother when the dashing younger sibling is so much more marketable? And, ironically, the Spitfire's classified flaw was buried for exactly the same reason. Two powerful myths for the price of one. The Hurricane, with its simpler construction, was also easier to repair and maintain, often absorbing significant battle damage and returning to the fight quickly, a crucial advantage in the relentless aerial combat of 1940. Its robust design meant it could withstand more punishment, and its stability made it an excellent gun platform for attacking bombers. While the Spitfire tangled with enemy fighters at higher altitudes, the Hurricanes often engaged the bombers at lower levels, where their structural integrity and firepower proved devastatingly effective. Section 3. The German triplane that shouldn't have worked. Now, let's jump back a generation to the chaotic skies of World War I. In 1917, the Fokker WWII, yes, that iconic scarlet-painted triplane flown by the legendary Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, was rushed to the front. This happened largely after a captured British Sopwith triplane proved surprisingly effective and, frankly, embarrassed German pilots. What rarely gets printed in those romanticized histories of aerial combat is that almost every test pilot who flew the WWII prototype flat out refused to sign it off. They knew it was a death trap. It spun viciously, often without warning, making it incredibly difficult to recover. The middle wing blanked the elevator at certain angles, severely compromising control, and the castor oil mist, constantly sprayed from its rotary engine, choked the cockpit, making pilots sick and obscuring their vision. It was a nightmare to fly, unreliable and dangerous. Yet Manfred von Richthofen, a man driven by both skill and a need for a psychological edge, demanded it anyway. He loved its incredible climb rate, which gave him an advantage in vertical combat. The German High Command, desperate for a propaganda icon to boost wartime morale, issued it despite the glaring safety concerns. The result? A terrifying statistic. An estimated 80% of WWII airframes broke up in flight within 6 months of deployment. Wings simply parted company with the fuselage in steep dives, often due to structural failure. Anthony Fokker, the plane's designer, quietly, almost secretly added steel brackets to reinforce the wing spars. But you won't find that modification mentioned in the official manual. Pilots discovered the hard way, often with fatal consequences when their top wings snapped off in a desperate maneuver. Richthofen himself might have survived the war if he'd switched back to the more reliable Albatros DV. Instead, he kept the triplane, largely because it photographed so well for newspaper articles. It was a potent symbol, even if it was a deadly one. The WWII did introduce a significant technological innovation, however, a reliable synchronization gear that allowed its machine guns to fire through the propeller arc without hitting the blades, a pioneering technology that revolutionized aerial combat tactics. Section 4. The bomber that refused to die. Fast forward to 1943. The skies over Nazi Germany were a hellscape of flak and fighters, a gauntlet that American B-17 flying fortresses endured daily. Crews returned with photos that defied belief. Tails shredded to ribbons, engines dangling precariously by a few wires, windscreens starred like cracked ice. Ground crews, working tirelessly, would weld depot scrap onto the mangled airframes, call it battle damage, and send the fortress right back to war. But here's the untold part. The secret Boeing didn't want anyone to know. Boeing's original specifications stated that any more than 250 bullet holes in the wing box meant immediate retirement for the aircraft. A hard limit set for safety. By 1944, depot engineers, facing immense pressure and a desperate need for every available bomber, were signing off aircraft with 1,000+ holes. Why? Because replacements simply weren't arriving fast enough. The war effort demanded impossible sacrifices, not just from the crews but from the machines themselves. One fort, famously nicknamed All-American, flew home after a mid-air collision with a German Bf-109 that sliced its entire rear fuselage open like a tin can. The left horizontal stabilizer was gone, the fuselage almost severed, and 2 engines were dead. By all accounts, it should have disintegrated. Yet somehow, the bomber stayed pressurized enough to keep the crew alive at 25,000 feet. The pilot, Lieutenant Ken Bragg Jr., nursed the crippled aircraft back to base, holding it together with sheer skill, while the crew donned parachutes, ready to bail out at any moment. When it finally landed, every man uninjured, the tail sagged and collapsed to the ground, having held on just long enough to complete its mission. Boeing quietly uprated the fatigue life in later models, learning from the brutal realities of combat, but the paperwork never quite caught up with the legend. After the war, investigators found cracked spars in many retired B-17s that should have grounded the fleet months, even years earlier. The myth of the self-sealing fortress, a bomber that could absorb anything and keep flying, was born not from generous engineering margins, but from sheer desperation and the incredible resilience of both the aircraft and its crews. Section 5. The jet that did everything. Almost too well. Let's fast forward to the Korean War, 1952. The F-86 Sabre is celebrated in history books for its astonishing 10-to-1 kill ratio against the Soviet-built MiG-15. An almost unbelievable dominance, right? But what the Air Force didn't publicize, what they kept very quiet, was a critical detail. The Sabre's jet engine only produced about 200 pounds of thrust at sea level, significantly less than the MiG-15's more powerful Soviet engine. On paper, the MiG should have been superior in many performance metrics. So where did the F-86's real edge come from? It wasn't raw power. It was a box, a relatively unassuming piece of equipment, a sophisticated analog computer gun sight. This groundbreaking device, capable of calculating deflection up to 1,000 yards, essentially provided the pilot with a predictive aiming solution, making it far easier to hit a fast-moving target. Test pilots at Edwards Air Force Base, who understood its profound impact, affectionately or perhaps cynically called it cheat mode. It wasn't the airframe's inherent superiority, but a technological assist that leveled the playing field and then some. The secret didn't last forever. When the Soviets managed to capture a downed F-86, they quickly dissected its secrets. Their engineers copied the advanced gun sight within a year, integrating it into their own aircraft. The impact was immediate and dramatic. The vaunted 10-to-1 kill ratio dropped almost overnight. American pilots, suddenly stripped of their technological advantage, began to complain that their aircraft were underpowered. The lesson here is profound. The legend wasn't really the airframe, the sleek, swept-wing jet itself. It was a relatively small box of gyroscopes and electronics wired to a reflector glass. Once that secret leaked, once that technological advantage was neutralized, the Sabre's aura of invincibility quickly ended. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the true heroes of aviation are the unsung innovations hidden within. Section 6. The airliner that paid for itself by hauling mail. Now, let's switch gears to commercial aviation, to the dawn of the jet age. The Boeing 707's maiden passenger flight was a glamorous affair in October 1958, heralding a new era of fast, luxurious air travel. But here's a little secret. The program had actually been profitable since 1956, 2 years before it carried its first paying passenger. How on earth did Boeing manage that? Simple. Cargo holds stuffed to the brim with lucrative U.S. Postal Service mail contracts. Pan Am, the airline that famously launched the 707 into service, marketed the glamour of jet travel, the speed, the elegance, the Clipper experience. Yet the real consistent cash flow came from the 18,000 pounds of first-class letters and parcels, riding largely unnoticed underneath the passengers. These weren't just filler. They were the financial backbone. Boeing's sales team would tell airlines that the 707 would break even at a 55% load factor, meaning they needed more than half their seats filled with passengers to turn a profit. But internal memos reveal a different story. Even 40% passenger occupancy worked perfectly well if the mailbags were full. The public, sipping their cocktails at 30,000 feet, never knew their vacation photos and business trips were effectively being subsidized by airmail stamps. The 707, itself a derivative of Boeing's military KC-135 tanker, showcased the deep connections between military research and commercial innovation, a trend that continues to this day. Its design, leveraging military expertise, was a gamble that paid off handsomely, thanks in no small part to those unsung mailbags. Section 7. The Jumbo's hump wasn't for passengers. Roll forward to 1969, and the unveiling of another aviation icon, the Boeing 747. Its distinctive upper deck is famous for hosting luxurious lounges, cocktail bars, and even piano bars in its early days, a symbol of the golden age of air travel. But that iconic hump, that instantly recognizable silhouette, exists for a far more pragmatic and less glamorous reason. Boeing wasn't entirely sure airlines would buy a huge, 4-engine passenger jet. Joe Sutter's brilliant engineering team designed the 747 with a massive freighter nose door that hinged up over the cockpit, allowing oversized cargo to be loaded straight into the front of the aircraft. To make this work, the flight deck had to be positioned above the main deck, creating that second floor. This was Plan A, a highly adaptable freighter. Pan Am's legendary boss, Juan Trippe, however, insisted on maintaining the glamour of jet travel, so he demanded champagne ambiance for his passengers. Boeing, ever the pragmatist, swiveled the staircase, added windows to the upper deck, and called it a penthouse suite. But the underlying intention remained. Half the early 747s rolled off the assembly line with reinforced floors and heavy-duty cargo handling lugs hidden discreetly under the carpet. Boeing had a contingency. If passenger sales had tanked, if the SST's supersonic transports they feared would make the 747 obsolete had taken off, Boeing would have simply yanked out the seats, peeled back the carpet, and sold them as pure freighters overnight. That lavish party deck, the symbol of luxury, was actually Plan B. The cargo capability, the ability to haul massive amounts of freight through its unique nose-loading design, was the true strategic brilliance behind the jumbo jet. Section 8. The tin goose that banked on fear. Before the roar of jets, there was the distinctive drone of the Ford trimotor, first taking flight in 1926. Affectionately nicknamed the Tin Goose for its corrugated aluminum skin, it became a symbol of early American commercial aviation. You might think Henry Ford, the automotive titan, was a visionary when it came to aviation, but the truth is he wasn't particularly sold on flying. He invested heavily in the trimotor program because railroads terrified him. He'd nearly been hit by a steam locomotive in 1924, an incident that deeply unnerved him and cemented his belief that America needed a safer, alternative transportation network. The trimotor's distinctive corrugated aluminum skin, a feature that gave it its famous nickname, wasn't an original Ford design. It was a direct adaptation from Junkers aircraft in Germany, a pioneering design element from a country that would soon become a major geopolitical rival. Ford's lawyers, ever cautious, quietly paid patent royalties to Junkers to avoid any trade war unpleasantries. So, while passengers called it the flying washboard, unaware of its origins, those royalties meant that every trimotor sale, every dollar earned by an American icon, sent money to a future enemy. Ford eventually canceled the program in 1933, not because the plane was obsolete or unpopular, but because the patent pool expired, and the politics of sending money to Germany became increasingly awkward and untenable. The legend of American metal aircraft pioneering the skies, a symbol of industrial self-reliance, hides a complex and often uncomfortable international money trail. Section 9. The record. That wasn't in 1957. A Boeing 707 prototype flew nonstop from Seattle to Rome in a remarkable 11 hours and 6 minutes. Newspapers around the world trumpeted the achievement, hailing it as the world's longest nonstop jet flight. And, technically, it was true. Absolutely true. Except for one crucial detail, a little asterisk that the marketing department conveniently left out. This wasn't a standard passenger airliner. This was the tanker version of the 707, a military derivative, and it carried an additional 10,000 gallons of fuel in converted bomb bays. Yes, bomb bays. No airline ever bought that configuration for passenger service for obvious reasons. Yet to this day, marketing departments still clinging to the allure of that record occasionally quote the statistic in press kits, hoping no one asks about the fine print. It's a perfect example of how a fact can be technically correct, but entirely misleading when the full story isn't told. The Phantom's missing gun. Vietnam, 1965. The F-4 Phantom II, a powerful twin-engine fighter bomber, arrived in Southeast Asia as the epitome of modern air power. Early models, however, arrived without cannons. McDonnell executives, and indeed much of the Air Force and Navy brass, had been convinced that the age of dogfighting was over. They believed that sophisticated air-to-air missiles had made guns obsolete. Why carry heavy, clunky ammunition when you had heat-seeking and radar-guided ordnance? Pilots, however, quickly found themselves in a terrifying reality check. When agile North Vietnamese MiG-17s and MiG-21s slipped inside the minimum range of their missiles, F-4 pilots were left with nothing. They screamed for guns. In a desperate stopgap measure, the Air Force bolted on external 20mm Gatling gun pods, a clunky solution that added drag and wasn't always reliable. The Navy, notoriously stubborn, waited 3 agonizing years before installing internal cannons. During that perilous gap, Navy aviators resorted to jerry-rigging Zuni rocket pods to act as makeshift strafing weapons. The accuracy was so poor, the spread so wide that they famously joked you needed a destroyer on either side of the target to bracket it, to guarantee a hit. The cost of this misguided doctrine was immense. American crews paid a heavy price, losing 67 aircraft in engagements where a simple cannon might have turned the tide. When the internal gun finally arrived integrated properly into the airframe, kill ratios doubled overnight. The myth of the missile-only future, a triumph of theoretical thinking over combat reality, cost American lives and aircraft before the paperwork, the lessons learned in blood, finally caught up with the flawed engineering philosophy. Mid-roll CTA, 30 seconds. If these stories are rewriting what you thought you knew about aviation history, then you absolutely need to hit that subscribe button. There's a lot more classified paperwork, more hidden truths, and more untold sagas where this came from. And we're just getting started. Drop a comment below with the aircraft you thought you understood, the one whose legend you've always believed. We love digging up the files that prove you wrong, in the most fascinating way possible. Your next favorite untold story is just a click away. Section 11, the supersonic Concorde that paid its way with cargo holds. Concorde. The name itself conjures images of unparalleled luxury, of the wealthy and famous sipping champagne at twice the speed of sound. It's remembered as a lavish, often subsidized toy for the elite. Yet British Airways in the 1980s managed to keep its Concorde fleet remarkably profitable, not just through those eye-watering ticket prices, but by hauling high-value freight. Beneath the opulent cabin, the forward cargo hold stayed heated to a precise 18 degrees C, a seemingly arbitrary temperature, but one that was absolutely perfect for transporting delicate silicon wafers, microchips, and other sensitive electronics. But it wasn't just tech. They also transported diamonds, rare artworks, and even racehorse semen, all cargo that demanded speed, security, and precise environmental control. One internal British Airways memo, now declassified, revealed a stunning fact. A single Tokyo to London cargo charter filled with these precious goods could pay for the equivalent of 40 passenger seats on the same flight. Passengers, blissfully unaware, continued to sip their champagne at Mach 2, never realizing their exclusive ticket was often subsidized by microchips racing against the clock, or by the future of a champion racehorse. Concorde was a marvel of engineering, but its true financial success lay in a shrewd, unglamorous exploitation of its unique capabilities. Section 12. The spy plane built from scrap. The SR-71 Blackbird, the legendary Mach 3 Plus reconnaissance aircraft, was a masterpiece of Cold War engineering, pushing the boundaries of speed and altitude. Its sleek black titanium skin was key to its extreme performance, allowing it to withstand the incredible heat generated by sustained supersonic flight. But here's the truly mind-boggling part of its story. In 1967, much of that vital titanium came from Soviet ore, the CIA needing this specialized, heat-resistant metal that the US simply didn't produce in sufficient quantities or purity for the Blackbird's extreme requirements. Set up an elaborate network of front companies. These fictitious businesses, operating in various third-world nations, would discreetly purchase the raw titanium ore from the Soviet Union. The Soviets, thinking they were selling to legitimate, if somewhat obscure, commercial entities. Some accounts even suggest they believed the titanium was for pizza ovens. Happily supplied the metal, earning valuable foreign currency. This ore was then shipped, often via Canada, to Lockheed's secretive Skunk Works facility. The same titanium that built the Blackbird, enabling it to spy on the Soviet Union, once formed the very bedrock of Soviet industry, perhaps even destined for their own military applications or, yes, even civilian goods. Officially, the US had no titanium source pure enough or in sufficient quantity for Mach 3.2 flight. Unofficially, and with a delicious irony, the crucial raw material circled the globe twice before becoming a cutting-edge American spy plane, flying high above its unwitting source. Section 13. The helicopter that whispered. In the brutal, dense jungles of North Vietnam, noise was a death sentence for reconnaissance missions. Helicopters, by their very nature, are loud, their rotors beating the air with a telltale thrum that can be heard for miles. But in 1972, a highly specialized aircraft, the Hughes 500P, changed the game. It flew recon missions over enemy territory with an almost eerie silence, thanks to a revolutionary design. Its tail rotor was driven by belts instead of noisy gears. This deceptively simple innovation cut noise by an astonishing 60%. Pilots, accustomed to the deafening din of conventional choppers, dubbed it the loach that hushed, referring to the OH-6A light observation helicopter, which the 500P was based on. This quiet one had a 5-bladed main rotor and a 4-bladed tail rotor, both designed to reduce noise alongside a large muffler. It was so quiet that ground personnel struggled to pinpoint its location until it was nearly overhead. Only 2 of these stealthy machines were ever built. One tragically crashed during a mission, and the other, after its brief secretive service, vanished into a CIA warehouse, locked away from prying eyes. The Army vehemently denied the program's existence for decades, until photos finally leaked in 1994, revealing the truth. The quiet tech developed in the shadows of Vietnam didn't disappear. It resurfaced, refined, and integrated in today's stealth Blackhawks, proving that an untold story, a technological secret, kept looping and evolving for 3 decades, shaping the future of covert operations. Section 14. The drone that landed on a carrier before it was cool. Today, carrier-based drones are the cutting edge of naval aviation, a vision of the future. But the future arrived much, much earlier than most people realize. In 1984, a Teledyne Ryan Model 234, painted a menacing flat black, touched down precisely on the deck of the USS Kitty Hawk, using a tailhook just like a manned fighter jet. This was not a public demonstration. It was a highly classified, unannounced test. The Navy, ever masters of bureaucratic obfuscation, referred to it simply as RQ-234, in a tiny footnote of an obscure budget line, effectively burying its existence in plain sight. What's truly remarkable is that the airframe of that 1984 drone looks almost identical to today's MQ-25 Stingray, the Navy's cutting-edge unmanned aerial refueling and reconnaissance aircraft. The footage of that pioneering landing, a glimpse into a future that was already happening, sat classified, locked away for decades, until it was finally declassified in 2008. Publicly, carrier-based drones made their grand debut in 2013 with much fanfare. The gap between the actual event and its public acknowledgement, a staggering 29 years of quiet, secretive development. It's a powerful testament to how much advanced technology is often operating in the shadows, shaping tomorrow's capabilities long before the public is ever allowed to know. Section 15. The Forgotten Engine. That saved the 747. When Boeing embarked on the ambitious 747 program, it bet heavily on a new generation of high-bypass turbofan engines. The primary choice was Pratt & Whitney's JT9D. But in 1968, as the first 747 prototypes neared completion, Pratt & Whitney encountered severe development delays and couldn't deliver their engines on time. This was a crisis. The entire 747 program, a multi-billion-dollar gamble, was teetering on the brink of cancellation. Enter Rolls-Royce. Across the Atlantic in a London hangar sat a prototype of their new RB211 engine, initially designed for Lockheed's L1011 TriStar. Desperate, Boeing borrowed 3 test units of the RB211. To maintain the illusion that everything was on track with their American supplier, they painted these British engines white and slapped on fake Pratt & Whitney logos. With this clandestine swap, the first 747, powered by its secretly British engines, flew to the Paris Air Show, making its spectacular public debut. The engines didn't just work. They performed flawlessly, saving the program from potential disaster. Boeing kept the deal a closely guarded secret until the retirement of those prototypes in 1989. For 6 crucial months, at the very birth of the American jumbo jet, the aircraft that would revolutionize global travel was, in a very real sense, partly British. It's a fascinating footnote in aviation history, revealing the high-stakes improvisation behind the scenes of monumental engineering achievements. Section 16. The airshow crash that changed nothing. Sometimes, even the most unbelievable events get swept under the rug, especially when international politics are involved. Take 1982. A MiG-23 pilot during an airshow in Poland suffered an engine malfunction and ejected. The jet, trimmed nose up and with its afterburner blazing, didn't crash immediately. Instead, it became a ghost flight, droning on for an astonishing 900 kilometers, nearly 560 miles, before finally running out of fuel and crashing into a forest in Belgium, narrowly missing a farmhouse. NATO radar tracked this rogue, unmanned Soviet bloc fighter as it traversed European airspace, a chilling, uncontrolled missile. The story was immediately buried by all sides to avoid embarrassing the Warsaw Pact, who certainly didn't want to admit they'd lost control of a modern fighter over Allied territory, and NATO, who didn't want to provoke a diplomatic incident. The same bizarre scenario, a runaway unmanned aircraft, repeated itself in 1989 when a Soviet drone drifted across Europe, eventually crashing in Germany. Despite these terrifying incidents, uncontrolled military hardware flying over densely populated areas, no international rulebook was changed, no new protocols were officially established. Why? Because officially the first incident never happened. It's a stark illustration of how political expediency can override even the most pressing safety concerns, leaving dangerous truths conveniently forgotten. Section 17. The final secret. Spitfire's wing still flexes. We started with a secret about the Spitfire, and we'll end with one that brings us right into the present day. Modern laser scans of museum-piece Spitfires, those gleaming symbols of wartime heroism, reveal a startling truth. The iconic elliptical wing still twists a full 11 degrees at 350 knots, just a hair's breadth away from its notorious 1939 failure point. That original classified flaw, the aileron snatch we discussed earlier, was a very real, very dangerous characteristic. Today, when these magnificent heritage aircraft take to the skies for airshow displays, they aren't flying purely on their original flawed design. Engineers now quietly install carbon fiber rods, a modern composite material deep within the wing structure. These rods are meticulously hidden, almost invisible, designed to stop the wings from shedding their ailerons during high-speed display flights. The fix is artfully concealed beneath the authentic metal skin, ensuring that visitors still see the Spitfire as it always was, a pure, unadulterated warbird. 85 years later, the legend of the Spitfire keeps flying, but only because advanced composites, those silent heroes of modern engineering, are quietly holding it all together, preserving a myth while ensuring safety. It's a beautiful, poignant irony. Wrap up CTA, 20 seconds. Stories like these aren't just dusty anecdotes. They sit in every hangar, in every forgotten logbook if you know where to look and if you're willing to ask the right questions. We've only scratched the surface today, so make sure you tap that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because next week, we're going to crack open the classified logbooks of the U-2 spy plane and uncover the phantom altitude it never officially reached. Drop a comment below right now with the aircraft you want excavated, the legend you want us to dissect. We read every single one, and your suggestion might just be our next deep dive into aviation's untold stories. Conclusion. 120 seconds. We started with 23 seconds, that terrifying, life-or-death window a Spitfire pilot lived within, and in a way, we end with the same measure of time because legends, true legends, are often measured in heartbeats, in moments of extreme pressure and hidden truths. From fabric-winged Hurricanes quietly scoring the real, uncelebrated kills, to B-17 signed off for combat with 1,000 bullet holes defying all logic, to the glamorous 707 secretly hauling airmail beneath unsuspecting tourists, the aircraft we worship, the machines that define our skies, carry secrets stitched into their rivets and sealed behind classified stamps. Every polished museum piece, every iconic silhouette, hides a complex ledger of desperation, improvisation, and political maneuvering. The myths we cherish aren't necessarily outright lies. They're often just convenient shorthand for stories too messy, too nuanced, or too sensitive for the headlines of their time. They're simplified narratives that serve a purpose, whether for morale, marketing, or national security. Remember that next time you glance up at a contrail streaking across the sky. Somewhere inside that silver tube, whether it's a modern airliner or a vintage warbird, there's a forgotten cargo hold. A crucial line in a long-lost budget, or a quiet, hidden retrofit that changes everything we thought we knew about the machines that take us to the heavens. The sky, it turns out, is full of secrets.